Hello, my name is Celeste Valdivia, and my presentation is over sensory processing disorder, also known as SPD for short. So let's get started. So, what is sensory processing disorder? While I was doing my research, the definition that I got from there was difficulties in regulating emotions and behaviors, as well as motor abilities that lead to impairment in development and functioning. In other words, it's a disorder in which the brain both cannot respond or receive information coming through our senses. Okay, regulation disorders of sensory processing. So here are the different types. Type 1 is a child that may be hypersensitive. Subtype A is a child that may be fearful, cautious. Subtype B, a child that may be negative, defiant. Type 2, they may be hyposensitive, underresponsive. And type 3, sensory stimulation seeking impulsive. So what do each of those mean exactly? Well, I'm going to break it down for you guys right now. So starting with the first one, hypersensitive. What that looks like is children with low sensory threshold. So a student with low sensory threshold is not comfortable with sound, with a lot of sound or a lot of movement going around them with a lot of people. So it will not be ideal for a child with SPD to ride a bus. There's a lot of children on there and a lot of sounds going on. Loud ones too. That's when they let it all out. That's when they scream. Fearful, cautious, they're fearful of sounds, movement, or visual stimuli. So the same as the child riding the bus. And also another example to give is like a public swimming pool area. They don't do well there. There's a lot going on. Not only is there a lot of sound, a lot of people, but the whole splashing of the water, just the running around. They don't feel comfortable with that. Negative defiant, they're controlling at times, defiance behavior and aggression when provoked. So that means that they may not take no lightly. They're the ones that may throw a book as shown here if they don't get their way, or even if there's a student messing with them, they won't really comprehend like to go talk to a teacher or or to stay calm. They will turn aggressive towards that student. That will not leave them alone. Hyposensitive, underresponsive is children with high sensory threshold, underreactivity to sounds, movement, smell, taste, touch, and or proprioception. So we had a student that had low sensory threshold to where they didn't like a lot of sound, and here we have a student that has SPD and may have high sensory threshold. So in other words, they may seem like they're ignoring you, but in reality they're not really capturing that sound that you're calling out for them. So you may be screaming their name like, hey, so and so, and they're not turning around, but it's really that it's not going through their senses that you're calling out for them. And they also have lack of interest in exploring properties, playing challenging games. So they're least likely to be that one child to join a group of other children that are playing. They feel more comfortable and more at ease with themselves. Sensory stimulation, seeking, impulsive, that is high sensory threshold, active self-regulation strategies, high need for motor discharge, and prone to accidents. So it may be that one child that is in constant contact with people and objects, recklessness, and disorganized behavior. So it may be the child that does not stay in their bubble, that's always in another student's bubble. Or it may also, to give another example, is as they're on their way to turn in a paper, they may trip over a student's chair or bump into someone or into the cabinet that's been there the whole time, but they're prone to accidents, so they'll be the ones to bump into it. Okay, so as I was doing my research and I did get that information of what SPD looks like in a child, I realized that there was lack of studies. And as I was thinking that myself, I actually ran into a source that talked about the lack of studies that there were. So it also talked about how there's, depending on who is analyzing a child, will be what their perspective on a child would be. So, for example, there's child psychiatrists that study children on that or analyze children for that, and occupational therapists as well. But if they are more familiar with other things such as autism, then they are bound to kind of just focus on that rather than SPD. So it's hard to distinguish SPD from autism, anxiety, sensory modulation, and sensory-based motor. So are there any further studies? Well, as of now, I've seen that in South Africa, what they are doing to take further steps into getting more familiar with SPD is that they are getting specialized training for SPD for their nurses. And they're also doing interventions and making sure that the interventions are being carried out by the nurses and that there's adequate support regarding SPD, and that they're also doing referrals of a child with SPD. So, what do we do? There's lack of studies. We're still learning about this. What do we do in the meantime? So in the meantime, I saw this picture and thought it was really neat. It's the picture that shows some signs of sensory processing disorder and what a child feels to be in their body. So for example, right here, it shows that they may dislike hair being brushed or cut. They may be sensitive to light. So something that you can do with that is I've seen that there's a lot of times where teachers can dim their lights a little bit. So do it not to where it's too dark, and do it to where it benefits everyone as a whole. I've also seen that they do, for example, like blue construction paper over their lights, and that kind of dims it a little, but it's still enough for the rest of the students to be able to see and feel comfortable with that as well. And a lot of times they really enjoy it. So that's something to look into. They may cover ears when there are loud sounds such as vacuums, hair dryers, or they may even scream or cry whenever they hear loud sounds like that. So that's something really great to look into. If you have a student that starts crying or screaming because of another student that's being defiant, instead of brushing it off and being like, it's okay, like they're just being defiant, just ignore them. Like, no, look into it, reach out to them. It may be more than just them crying because they are, they may be afraid because of something else, because they may have SPD, may have issues with food, textures. Gagging is common when trying new things. They may cry or get upset over clothing tags or textures. So a lot of times if they're in a bad mood, or if their shoes are if they're telling you like, I'm not having a good day, my shoelaces are too tight, instead of just ignoring and being like, really, shoelaces? Like, help them out. Let them know like, hey, you can loosen them up a little bit. Here, let me help you out. And maybe something that small can change their day. They can't be touched or can't be touched enough. So a lot of times they don't like to be touched, and then there's a lot of times where they actually do like to be squeezed, and that calms them. For you like to squeeze them carefully and just talk to them, but then a lot of times they may not want you to even get near them. But you'll start getting to know each and every child every day a little more, and you'll know what they are into and what they're not into, what they would like, and what makes them feel comfortable. May show little or no reaction to stimulation, even pain, or extreme hot and cold, or overreaction to pain or hot and cold. So again, it's just those little things that you really have to look out for. And also, as mentioned before, may have poor coordination. So they may be bound to trip over chairs and stuff. You gotta be really careful. Okay, so what can you do for support in the classroom? I know I already mentioned a few as I was going through that, but some more would be explain. So don't be short with your words. Don't just say, if they ask like, may I go to the restroom? Don't just say no. sit down, you know, like, which I mean, you shouldn't with any child, right? But even more so with them, you really need to explain to them, like, hey, not right now, because like in 5 minutes, guess what, it's going to be time to go. If you could hold it in, that would be great, you know, unless it's like an emergency or something. But you have to really go into depth and explain to them that it's not that you're just wanting to say no and be mean, that there's, you know, you're saying it for a reason. And it may even help to have like a little Velcro booklet, like to let them know, like, first we're going to do this and then we'll go to the restroom, so they can visualize it and really be okay with that. So which goes on with the schedule. Again, maybe even having a booklet, having the schedule on there will work out great. Or even like a schedule. I know there's a lot of times where teachers keep their schedules by their door and let them know, like, hey, check out the door when it hits this time, then we'll get to do whatever they're looking forward to, you know. Headphones, muffs, those are for the child that don't like a lot of sounds. You know, it's great to always keep those headphones or even muffs so you can feel more comfortable on their ears, and allow them to wear that. Like, if they feel more comfortable wearing it, why not? It does not harm anyone, it benefits everyone, you know. Fidget toys. So some examples for some fidget toys would be, I know there's like those squishy balls that they can hold on to, maybe even some chewable necklaces or bracelets. I don't know if those still exist somewhere. And also like those elastic bands that people usually wear to work out in. They're really great. I know I've seen some people put them like on the feet of chairs and just wrap it around, and they can kind of kick that to where they're not harming anyone, not making noise because they're not kicking the table or the wall, and it's just that elastic band that they are moving around in. And lastly, do not force them. Do not force them to be in a group. If y'all are doing a group activity and that child does not want to be a part of that, do not force them. If they are comfortable working by themselves with their headphones on and their fidget toy and they're staying focused, let them. Okay, and that's it, the end. That last page is my works cited page. Okay, thank you so much.